Hi, I'm Charlie Frost, and on this week's episode of the 24MX Workshop, I'm going to demonstrate how to reinstate the new brake disc. So the first job in order to replace the front disc is to remove the front wheel from the bike. So to do that, we'll need a 10mm socket set in order to release the locking nuts either side, and also a 24mm socket to take the wheel nut off. So firstly, we're going to slacken off just these two locking nuts this side, because if you slacken off all full 10mm nuts, the spindle itself won't hold. So by leaving these two done up this side, that will grip the spindle in order for the wheel nut to come undone. So we'll slacken off these two first. And then we'll get the 24mm socket to undo the wheel nut. So like I said, because we've left these two locking nuts done up, that's going to hold the spindle in order for us to slacken off the wheel nut this side. But we're going to take this one completely out because obviously we want to remove the spindle. So we're going to take the wheel nut out fully and put that up on the stand so we don't lose it or kick it somewhere. And then the next two 10mm over this side, we're going to slacken them off in order to release the spindle, like that. And then sometimes I just get the end of the socket, put it in there and give the spindle a tap. Not too hard, because obviously you don't want to damage the end of your socket, but just enough to pull the spindle out through here, and then releasing the front wheel like so. And same again, we're going to put the spindle, personally I put the spindle back through the fork like that, so we don't lose it or we don't kick it under the workbench. So the next job is with the Enduro scene, a lot of us, we run the disc guards. Now, the disc guards obviously prevent us from bending the front disc, but as you can see, it's on a spacer. So we're going to take the spacer completely out, allowing us to get to all of the 8mm bolts holding the disc in place. So we'll just grab a hammer and a bar to knock that out. So we're just going to put the bar through the hub itself, and we're going to knock the wheel spacer out like that. So as you can see, pretty simple. So the spacer is all one piece on the disc guard. So I'll put that to one side. And now you can see, pretty simple job. We've just got 6 8mm bolts. We're going to slacken off and then replace the disc. I normally tend to slacken them off one by one and then go around individually and remove it fully. I normally start at the bottom and then remove them one by one. And as you can see on the bolt itself, we've got some thread lock already on there. So obviously that shows that the bolt was held in firmly. So we'll get the remaining bolts out. So like I said, now that I've left the top one in place, the disc won't fall down and damage the wheel. So hold the disc with left hand, last bolt to come undone. And there you have it. So there's the old disc removed. We've got the new disc to go on. Now, I'll try and show you on the camera if possible. Sometimes you'll see, as a sign of wearing on the discs, the top bit here becomes rather wavy, whereas the new disc is obviously nice and straight. So sometimes if you run your finger and thumb around the tip of the disc and it feels like there's a bit of a curved edge, you'll know that the disc is worn. Or obviously if you bend the disc, then you'll feel it when riding. So you're going to reinstate the new disc. Now, one thing to be wary of, obviously with these bolts, you do have some excess thread lock in the thread itself. So I normally just give it a quick blowout to get rid of any excess thread lock. You can reuse the existing bolts. You can obviously put some new thread lock on the bolts, but these are pretty good. So we'll just use the same bolts to reinstate the new disc. Starting at the top again, so we can hold the disc in place. And then we'll go around one by one. Just do them up finger tight for now, or as tight as you can do them by fingers. And then we'll get the socket set onto it to tighten them up fully. I always tend to go opposite bolt to bolt. So if I start at one, I'll go opposite, opposite, opposite. So you do it. So if you do it clockwise or anti-clockwise, you don't pinch the disc. Whereas if you go opposite each other, then more chance the disc will sit in nice and flat. So it's that one, down to the bottom, up to the top. So these are just sort of pinch tight for now. And then when all 6 are done up pinch tight, we'll go around one by one and tighten them up fully. So that's all the disc bolts back in properly. And then now we're going to reinsert the front wheel back in place. Now on previous videos, I have shown you different techniques of removing the front wheel. Now one of them was I pushed my knee against the caliper to open up the pads. This is another way of opening up the pads. If you get yourself a long flat-headed screwdriver, like so, you can simply put your screwdriver in between the front pads. So I'll show you around here. Put the screwdriver in between the pads like that. Simply turn the screwdriver and open up the pads, which will make it easier to slide the front disc in. And that way you haven't damaged anything by using a thick screwdriver, and I've got more of an opening to slide your front disc in. And then very simple, same again. Just gonna get the front disc guard, slide it back in where the spacer should go, make sure it's flush, tap it in, new disc in place. So before we install the front wheel, we're just going to give the spindle and the lower fork legs a clean, because as you can see, there's a lot of dirt and grease build up. So with an old bit of rag and with a bit of spray, give the spindle a clean off. Also makes it easier for it to slide through the front wheel. Get rid of all the old dirt and build up of residue. Same again, just give the bottom forks a quick wipe out, just to make life easier to slide the spindle back through the front wheel and also the bottom of the forks. Now I tend to just give the spindle a little layer of spray, almost like a lubricant, just to make it easier to slide back through the front wheel. So now that we've opened up the pads and we've cleaned off the forks, we can now put the front wheel back into place. It's quite a fiddly job when you've got a disc guard because it likes to move about. So if you can try and line the disc up first into the pads, making sure the disc guard is in place. Yeah, it's quite a naddery one, like so. And then grab your spindle, back through the first fork, through the hub. And this is where it gets interesting. You've got to try and line the spindle up to come through the brake disc guard, but also the fork. So if you get it right, like that. So now it's all lined up. The first job, we're going to now work backwards and we're going to tighten up these locking nuts this side and then install the wheel nuts onto the spindle. So like I said, these two locking nuts will grab that spindle and hold it tight. As we do the wheel nut up, it will tighten up and the spindle will stay nice and firm. So using a 10mm socket, we're going to tighten up the locking wheel nuts this side. You can do both or just one. One will be enough to hold that spindle in place, like that. Then grabbing our wheel nut, same again, just get a bit of spray just to get rid of all the dirt build up. And then put that one into there. Making sure you don't cross thread this part. It's very easy to get this wrong and cross thread in the spindle. With a 24mm socket, I'm going to tighten this one right up now. Making sure the disc guard is pretty much center. So now that we've kept that locking wheel nut tight this side, we're going to do this one tight. Like so. And then the next job is to make sure that the forks are lined up straight. So sometimes if you just now tighten all the locking nuts up, the forks could be a bit sort of skewiff, whereas you want to make sure they're straight. So what I do now is I slacken off the locking nut this side, spin the front wheel, and then pump the front brake so the caliper goes back into place, because obviously the pads are still open from when we prized it open with the screwdriver. So I'm going to slacken off this locking nut this side again. Like so. I'm going to give that front wheel a spin, pump the front brake. So as you can see now, it's back working like normal. And then from left to right, we're going to do the 4 10mm locking nuts up, and then job done. Two. 3 and 4. So now they're all tight, front wheel's in line, and front brake is working. That is your front disc replaced. So now that we've replaced the front brake disc, we're now going to go on to do the rear brake disc. Pretty straightforward job like the front wheel. We're just going to remove the rear wheel, have it on the side, and then simply undo the 6 8mm bolts and install the new disc. So the first job is to slacken off the rear wheel. But like I've said in previous episodes, what I'll do is I'll push my knee against the caliper to open up the brake pads when we install the wheel back into the bike. So I'm going to simply grab the wheel, push our knee against the caliper, and open up those pads, so it gives ourselves more space to install the wheel back in. So to undo the wheel. If you maintain your bike enough, you should be able to push your spindle out through with your thumb, and then not forgetting the adjuster, leave that to one side, and then remove the spindle all the way out, and also the chain. And then the same tip before, I always put the spindle in the foot peg so I don't lose it and it doesn't go for a walkabout. Now you can see on the disc, it's very worn around the edges. And if you compare it to the new one, you can see the big difference in obviously color, but also on tops of the edges, they do get a bit of an edge to them. Whereas this is obviously nice and flat. And also, I'm not sure if you can see, it's a lot thicker than the old one. Most bikes, I think you can get to 50, 60 hours and change the discs. But obviously if you bend the disc, then you need to replace it. So for now, we're just going to install the new genuine disc. So like I said before in previous videos, we're going to start at the top, work our way around, but we're going to leave the top bolt in so we don't drop the disc on the floor. So all 6 bolts removed. And like I said, if you can see that, you can see a difference in the thickness of the disc, but also on the top, it has sort of an edge to it. So that shows that obviously there's wear and tear, whereas a new disc is nice and thick. Now, I don't know if you can see here, but you can see the marks of all the old thread lock. So we're just going to give that a clean out, give the bolts a clean off, and then install some new thread lock onto the bolts. So I'm going to spray some cleaner into the threads. Get rid of all the old thread lock. And also we're going to give the old bolts a quick spray off as well. Just get rid of any dirt. Let that soak in a sec. And then give them all a wipe off one by one. Normally the thread lock that comes on the bolts from standard, it stays on the bolts and it is quite messy, but these ones are pretty clean, so that's good. Next, I'm going to use the thread lock. Because we're reusing the old bolts, we're going to want to install this so the bolts stay in the wheel nice and tight. So not much on each bolt, a simple blob will do enough, like that. I'm going to start at the top again. Just do it finger tight for now until we've put all 6 bolts into place. Like I said, not too much, just a blob, so it'll spread itself around the bolt as we do it up. And then when the last one is pretty tight, we're going to go back round and double check they're all tight. So, go one by one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So, that is the new brake disc installed. Simply slot it back into the bike and job done. And like I said, because we've already pushed the caliper out with our knee, the brake pads are now nice and open, so it makes it easier to get the disc into place. So we're going to give our spindle a quick clean off to make it easier to slide through the wheel. So lining up the wheel into the swing arm, and then the disc into the pads. Slide the spindle through, and then not forgetting to put the chain on. And also the spacer, or adjusting spacer, whatever you want to call it. Tap the spindle through. And then lastly the wheel nut. Now a little trick I think I've mentioned before. What we'll do, so we'll grab ourselves a screwdriver. Now I'll stick the screwdriver through the sprocket, this side. So what that does is when I pull the wheel backwards, it'll pull tension on the wheel. So now when we tighten up the wheel the other side, you'll see that the adjusting spacer has now pulled itself up to the bolt. Because obviously if you were to put the wheel in, you've got a gap there, and if you tighten it up like that, the wheel isn't straight in the swing arm. So by putting this screwdriver into the sprocket and then pulling the wheel back, if you look around here, you'll see the wheel pull itself back forward, so we know it's touching the adjuster. So we're going to tighten that up, and then put the wheel forward, removing the the screwdriver, and then tighten that rear wheel up tight. And then lastly, not forgetting to make sure that we pump that rear brake so we don't go and ride off and try and do a wheelie and forget that the rear brake isn't intact. That was a pretty basic tutorial on how to change your rear brake disc. Now, like I said, you know when to change it because you can see the top edges get warped, or with the Enduro scene, you might bend the disc on a rock or a stone. So yeah, pretty straightforward way in how to replace your rear brake disc. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you took something away from it. Please don't forget to like and subscribe on the 24MX YouTube channel, and I'll see you on the next episode.